Hey guys, this is Yvonne, and I'm uploading a new video on my tabernacle teachings. The videos that I have up right now are like 10 years old, and I kind of want to just do a real quick recap on what I teach. And so we're going to start off here looking at just a rough diagram of the tabernacle. For those who are familiar, um, it'll be very easy to understand, I think, but for those who are not familiar, please go back and look at my other videos and also read Exodus 25. Familiarize yourself with the tabernacle. First of all, the furnishings. So here we have the outer court. It's a rectangle. Um, there's the east side. That's the entry. And I label all the furnishings in order upon entry at the gate, which I said was the way. And I know a lot of people. All of this stuff you'll hear from others, but this particular teaching I received in 2006, I believe. So, anyway, the first furnishing is the altar of sacrifice, it's the largest. Number two is the laver. Number three is the table. Number four is the menorah. Number five is the gold altar of incense. Number six is the ark. And seven I label as the actual structure, tabernacle itself. The boards are covered with gold. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And everything in scripture that I have found pretty much lines up, in my opinion, with this order upon entry. If you look at my creation video, we have fire, which is the light. We have water, which is the division of the waters on day 2 of creation. Day 3, the vegetation. Day 4, where the lights in the heavens created. It's represented by the menorah, the 7-branch menorah, or the 7 lights, a menorah. 5 is the altar of incense. And each day, remember, gets more and more complex in the creation account. So day 5 is the creatures arising from the water. So we have fish and we have fowl up in the air. And it represents that which goes up, which rises up at the altar of incense. And this is where prayer is, remember. So if you think about prayer being as spiritual warfare, and you think about angels, winged creatures, um, you know, maybe it makes sense to you that that's what we're talking about here. Reptilian creatures, um, angels, angelic beings here. And then day 6, we have the creation of man and land animals. And the ark have the cherubim over the lid, and the box contains 3 things: the jar of manna, which looked like seed, the rod that budded, Aaron's rod that budded, and the 2 stone tablets. And it might be controversial, but to me, or for me, that represented the male parts, you might say. And the whole box itself pretty much, in my opinion, represented the womb of a woman. And if you think about the most holy place is only entered in by the high priest once a year. A woman, I think, can only get pregnant once a year. And this is the day, I believe, that Adam and the woman were covered with coats of skin. I believe this is the day that they partook of the tree they were not supposed to have, and this is why they need covering. They covered not their eyes, I don't think, not their nose. They covered their reproductive organs. So this is another reason why this represents um, the reproductive parts. And then on day 7, God rested, and that represents the tabernacle itself, the tent, the boards, and the material, the skin over the linen is the first covering, and then there's the ram and the goat and the badger on top. But you might say that that's the structure of the body, the bones and the flesh. Remember, we are tents. We're described as temples of the Holy Spirit. So that's creation. And then we go back and we look at it as far as the human body. And I said that the altar of sacrifice represents hearing, which is the first sense, and the ear. And the reason why is because the animals are all around as you're approaching the tabernacle. If you can imagine yourself approaching the tabernacle from afar, you're going to be bringing animals for sacrifice, and you're going to hear a lot of animals, a lot of commotion. You're going to hear people. That's the very first thing that you're going to experience is hearing. And remember, faith cometh by hearing. That's the very first step, is hearing. And God speaks through the fire. There's fire at the altar of sacrifice. Number 2 is the laver, where we touch and we feel the water. Number 3 is the table, which represents the sense of taste, the tongue. And because the bread is on the table and we taste the bread. Number 4, of course, is vision, the sense of sight with the menorah and the lights. Number 5, the golden altar represents, of course, the sense of smell. And 6, I would call the head or the brain, the central processing unit that all these senses go to. And then 7, again, is the body structure of our temple. So hearing, touching, tasting, seeing, smelling, and then the sixth sense, you might say. Some might call that intuition. Okay, so then if you go look at my feast video, it's the same order, the annual feast I'm referring to, which begins with Pesach, which is number 1, the altar. Unleavened bread is the second annual feast. And why would the laver of water represent unleavened bread? Because the laver represents cleansing. It's a 7-day feast. And if you can imagine, if you go back and look at my Exodus story, the Exodus story is also told here in the tabernacle. The laver represents when the children of Israel went through the division of the waters, the Red Sea. And we don't know how long that took, but they were being cleansed. They were being baptized through there. So it represents cleansing, and that's what unleavened bread is. It's no sin. It's a day of hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. We have to leave. We have to eat unleavened bread. Number 3, the table represents first fruits. So if you can imagine the people who entered the wilderness, because the holy place also represents the wilderness, those who reached the wilderness first were probably young men that were not married, that probably were ahead of the rest. So we can imagine first fruits there, but also the vegetation again of the third day of creation. It all lines up. The 12 sons are represented with the 12 loaves. The first fruit, Israel. Number 4 feast is Shavuot, or Pentecost, or Feast of Weeks. And that's the 7 light menorah. Feast of Weeks is the 2 leavened loaves. It's the first fruits, but it's leavened. And I can go into detail about why the menorah represents the leaven, but that's in another video that I have not uploaded yet, because again, this is what I believe, that the menorah represents the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, of which Adam, or the woman, partook of first, and she was enlightened, or she saw she was naked. So we have light here, and we have sin. And let's see, the fifth feast is Yom Teruah, or Rosh Hashanah, is what the Jews understand that or call that. It's the day of blowing, actually. And here we have the 4-horned altar of incense. And a day of blowing, basically, of shouting, praying, breathing, shouting. And then we'll go on. I have detailed notes and articles on this in detail, but right now I'm just, like I said, recapping the videos that I have uploaded so far. Number 6 is the most holy place where the ark is, and that's, of course, Yom Kippur. That's only entered once a year. So that represents the feast of Yom Kippur. And 7, the structure represents the Feast of Tabernacles, or Sukkot, because it's a tent and we're supposed to dwell in booths. Okay, let's see. I want to touch back on the tree of the knowledge of good and evil being the menorah, and the table of showbread being the tree of life. I won't go into detail, but if you notice, if you see this as the Garden of Eden, you'll see that the 2 that represent vegetation, the menorah, of course, looks like a tree, and then the bread on the table is the third day of creation. So I see these opposite each other. They're in the middle of the garden, tree of life. And if you think about the tree of life in the book of Revelation, it talks about the 12 fruits. There's 12 loaves on that table. And there's a whole lot of other reasons why uh, death and life are in the power of the tongue. Let's see, the menorah, like I said, the day the woman and the man partook of it, their eyes were opened. And we have here the eyes, the vision, the sense of sight. We have Shavuot, which is Mount Sinai, the giving of the Torah, where we see what sin is. So I have other notes on why those represent those two trees. Okay, now on the video that I have on the entrances, let's go over that real quick. You enter in from the east, and that first entry is called the gate. It sits on 4 pillars, which I said were Noah, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, because they are the ones that passed on the story from creation. And where did we get the story? Word of mouth. It wasn't written or written down supposedly until Moses. So anyway, that's the gate. It's the way. It's the 4 patriarchs. And the second entry is into the actual tent itself, the Mishkan, the tabernacle, and that's the door. It's called the door. It hangs on 5 pillars, which I said were the 5 books of Moses: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Those are gold in appearance. And everything that touches the ground is silver in as far as the tabernacle goes itself. The third entry is the veil, of course, and that hangs on 4 pillars. Oh, and back to the door. The door represents truth, and that's what Torah is. Torah is truth. And Yeshua said he was the way, the truth, and with the veil we have life. And we have the 4 gospels. It hangs on 4 pillars. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John tell the story of the life of Yeshua. So we have the way, the truth, and the life. You enter the tent through Moses. Most people are out here in the courtyard. That's where most people are. Accepted Torah are in the tent, the Mishkan. And then if you watch the other video that I have, the parable that Jesus told, we have the flock in the outer court. We have the servants working in the holy place. And then we have the virgins in the most holy place. The high priest could only marry a virgin. Way, truth of Moses, the life of Yeshua. Okay, the video I have on the order of the furnishings representing the order of the books. I said that Genesis was number one, where we have the altar of sacrifice. And if you go through Genesis, this is the very first furnishing that man built. They were altars of earth. Number two, the laver of water represents the book of Exodus itself, where we get the instructions for the tabernacle. You know, it was mandated that the priest wash. If they did not wash or cleanse themselves, they could die if they entered into the tent. So that's the second book of Moses, Exodus, where we get the theme of water throughout the book of Exodus. Water. Moses drawn from the water. We get the instruction for the tabernacle here at the laver. Remember, it represents cleansing and the division of the waters on day 2 creation, the firmament, the heavens, the open space. The tabernacle is a set apart place. And then let's see, 3 represents the book of Leviticus, where we get all kinds of instructions on consumption, basically, dietary, the offerings, things that God consumed on the altar, things that we can consume, things that consume us, like gossip, um, um, things having to do with speech, the mouth. Leprosy is described here in this book, etc. 4 is the book of Numbers, and this holy place also represents the wilderness. So in the book of Numbers, we have a lot of themes about vision and prophecy. I have a whole teaching on everything that lines up with this menorah representing the book of Numbers. We have vision, Balaam, Balak, etc. 5, we have the book of Deuteronomy. This is where Moses, the intercessor, gives his last words for the people to hear. He does not enter the promised land. So this is where he dies here. And remember, the 5th furnishing represents the spiritual world, the spiritual realm, you might say. So, and then 6 would represent what entered the promised land, and that was Joshua with the ark. So 6 represents the book of Joshua. Number 7, I say, is the book of Judges. This is where everyone gets their allotment of land, and there's judges throughout Israel judging. Like on thrones on the 7th day when we rest with Yeshua judging as priests.